Hi, you're listening to the Build Your Digital Community podcast. I'm your host, Christina Bartold, the co-founder and co-CEO of The Social Snippet, a social media agency focused on business owners growing their digital communities. On this podcast, we'll talk about all things digital community building so that you can grow your network and ultimately your business. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Build Your Digital Community. I'm your host, I'm Christina. I'm actually so happy my mic is working. I had a mic mishap today with another guest and had to unplug and replug, so I'm happy that we're in business over here. But today I have a new friend, Emily Trickey here, who is the co-founder of Brilliant Marketing. And one of the things I've been so impressed about Emily and Michaela is how incredible their work is. Having followed them on social and really looking at their stuff and the great work that they do, they get to help nonprofits and B2B service-based businesses create branding content marketing that lands with their audience. And I know how important branding is, right? Like this is like the foundation to so many pieces. And it's overlooked so many times, right? Where people get started and they make a cheap Canva logo, and I know everyone has their season, but it's amazing that you get to help business with that. So welcome, Emily.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Christina. I'm excited to be here.
Yay, I'm so excited to chat. And so I would love to hear from you. I always make everybody start by doing this, by telling me a little bit about you and kind of how you got into your work.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm Emily Trickey, the co-founder of Brilliant Marketing. And so we're a branding and marketing agency for brands reimagining the world. And so how I kind of got started, my sister Michaela and I started Brilliant Marketing in 2018. And so what happened is we actually went on a road trip together, and I was kind of like worked at agencies in Seattle and was wanting to kind of step away from that, and always wanted to have my own agency and business to have more of like a flexible lifestyle. I knew I wanted to be a mom someday, and just wanted to work for myself and work for brands and companies that I felt like were changing the world and making a difference in the world. And I just didn't want to work for assholes anymore. And so my sister was working in San Diego for a nonprofit. They're doing their communications, and we went on this road trip together and said, hey, what if we just created this brand and this agency together, and decided on a name. And then end of 2018, we launched our website and just started reaching out to our network. And here we are, like almost 5 years later. So we really started with like branding. My expertise is really on that brand strategy and like positioning side of things. So kind of like peeling back the layers to really understand like how do you position yourself in the market? Like what is your messaging beyond the look and feel of your logo, which we know is so important, the visuals, but how do you talk about what you do? Like what's your why? What's your how? And so really digging into that. And so we launched with this brand messaging, and then did the brand identity, and now we're doing content marketing and marketing strategy and social media and all those other things that come from the branding of, but really making sure that that brand story of who you are, what you do, and why you do it is like super solid before you just start throwing stuff out there.
I love that, Emily, because I do think that storytelling is one of those things that we always talk about, but not a lot of people do well. Like where I feel like storytelling is paramount, whether that's your website copy or that's your social media content. Like people want to be part of whatever you're doing from a story perspective. Like they want to root for you, they want to be part of the vision. And I can only imagine that's even bigger with nonprofits. Like you really want to be connected to what they're doing, because often they're fundraising and all of these pieces. So that's so fascinating.
Yeah, it's so true. And one of the big things that we do with our clients to get that brand messaging, to really hone in on that brand messaging, is focusing on like your target audience. So many people, they're like, well, I serve everyone, or it's all donors, or it's everyone that can buy this professional service or whatever it is. And it's like, no, like if you talk to everyone, you're talking to no one. And so let's get really specific about your target audience. Let's build them a persona. Like, who is Christina? Like, where does she live? What does she like? What kind of content does she consume? What are her wants and needs? And you as a brand, how do you solve those, and how can you talk to her and her pain points and her problems, and how do you solve them? And so that's kind of part of our brand messaging process, is really knowing who your customer is and actually talking to them. So we'll go and we'll chat with our clients' customers, talk to them on the phone, and like, hey, what do you think of this brand? Like, what are the top 5 adjectives that come to mind when you think of this nonprofit? Like, what are they doing great? What do they need to improve upon? And those insights are then used to help create that strategy and that marketing.
Wow. That's a huge commitment, like going and chatting with people's clients. Like I never thought about doing that kind of in our own work, but have you gleaned a lot of like really good insights from it?
Oh my gosh, so much. And I feel like that it kind of ties back to our differentiators is we try to take a conscious marketing approach. And what we mean by that is just being intentional about like what you're trying to do. So instead of just being like clickbaity or we're going to try and sell this thing and like slap something on it, it's like, no, like let's really get to the root of like who you are, who you serve, why you do it, and like what's the best way to reach that person and the most efficient and best way to do it. And so you need insights and you need things to help create that strategy in order to have that conscious marketing approach. And so that's why with most of our clients, unless it's budget prohibitive, we really try to build that into our process. And it's really fun to talk to the customers. You get so much like insight and so many characters, and the clients that we then get to like share those insights with, they're like, oh yeah, like, you know, this is really good because we had these hypotheses about like what we're doing, but this really helps to like solidify what we think. Or actually, we never thought about that. We're going to use some of these ideas to create a new product or a new service. So that was actually happened with one of our clients. That's one of the target audience customer interviews. They were like, you should create this like HR starter package. This is an HR firm. And so instead of offering like all their services, it was like, why don't you just do like a mini one for startups? Like startups need like these 3 things. So like, why don't you just create the starter package? And so we put that into our strategy document that we shared them. And then they ended up launching this product like 6 months later.
Wow. I think that's an amazing testament to like having some of those conversations with your clients. And like, I think when people think of feedback, they think of it in a negative way, where it's like you ask your client something and you're only asking people when things are bad. So you're like, I only want feedback like if it's like, you need to give me the feedback. But I actually had a client, it was really interesting because we do social media engagement for folks, right? Where typically we engage for 15 minutes a day as the client and all of that. And we missed the mark on kind of their ideal client. Like, and it was fine. Like we had a really good conversation about it. They were like, this is actually like not really who I'm serving. This is who I'm serving. And we're like, oh, that's interesting. We had a really great conversation. And she was like, it would have been really interesting for me to have that conversation with an engagement person instead of doing it through the social media manager, which was our original process. But she called me to tell me, she's like, I don't know if this is something you want to implement and you should try this. And I'm like, okay, is this an individual experience, like where you're having this individualized experience, or is this something that would better our like communications with clients? Would we be able to like hone it in better? Like all of these pieces, right? So, but it's so easy like for us to not want feedback because we're scared of it being bad, when really like we need to be having those impactful conversations because that's the only thing that's going to better our practice.
It's so true. And I feel like sometimes I find that on a personal note, right? Like with your spouse or partner. But you're like, okay, sometimes it's hard to hear, but it's usually for the better, and you have that time to reflect. And like you said, like maybe we should change our process around how we do this. And that could increase our like customer satisfaction rate by like X% or something like that, which could be really cool.
What would you recommend to someone, Emily, like who is interested in getting and being more conscious in the way that they're marketing, and maybe they're not at a point where they can invest yet? What are some of the first steps you would tell them to kind of take to be able to lean into that a little bit more?
Definitely, I think it's starting with your brand. So I think the big things is like focus on your kind of like brand messaging. So answering those questions, and we actually have on our website a messaging framework tool that kind of takes you through some of those like steps of like your mission, your vision, your why. So just getting really clear on like who you are, because the more clear you can be, the less like time and energy you're going to be spent like educating people about that, or like constantly like trying to tell them who you are if you're telling them a bunch of different things. So like just being like really clear and concise about like who you are, what you do, why you do it, and then like who you serve. And so I think spending some time, especially as you're thinking about doing like your own marketing and branding, is like create a customer persona. And we're actually in the works of creating one of those to like share with people. But even if you just Google like ideal customer persona or customer avatar, and there's like usually a little picture of someone and their name, and then you can just fill in like where do they live, how much money do they make, like what are their wants and needs, answering just like a handful of those questions to help put that target audience hat on, and get in their shoes, because then you'll be able to get outside of your own, you'll be able to have perspective on like what does this person want and like how can I help solve that. And I think that's really important as you're thinking about content creation, is because you don't, and you know this with all the social media content creation and engagement that you all do, is like you can't just be like blasting like what you do. There has to be a conversation, and you have to be able to like come at it with like, how am I helping to solve this problem, and like being of service.
Big time. I think that that's something that people really miss on social, if I'm being honest, is like two things. It's like, one, often people are creating content for themselves. So they create content that they think like they like. And so even one of my clients was like, I think this should be a meme account. And I'm like, I don't think this should be a meme account. And I love this for you. I'm also not funny enough to make you memes. So like, I'm just not going to do it. But like, I can appreciate your perspective and thanks for that. But like, they're making content that they think is enjoyable, which is fine, but might not be what your ideal client wants. And the other thing that I think people don't do a good job of often is coming at it from service. Like, when you give away free information, there's this like old saying, I heard it once. It was like, don't spill, it's like an old sales thing. It's like, don't spill your jelly beans in the lobby. Like, don't show people like too many of your cards. And I'm like, this is literally the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life, because I'm such a big believer that like when you show people like really high quality free value, the paywall's gone, because they're like, of course I'm going to pay for you because you've provided such good free value that like, imagine what I'm going to get when I pay for it. So I'm always like, you don't want to go on and be like, hi, I'll make you a 6-month marketing strategy, like 100%, like let me redesign your website for free. Like then you're going to pay me. But like, if you have expertise in an area that you can educate on, whether that's messaging or whatever that looks like in your niche, do it. Like I'm like all for people providing that free value.
It's so true, because I feel like that's why it's like when I go on my own social media, it's like I have 2 small kids, so my social feed is like so much like parenting advice. Like how to just to stop whining, or what to feed them, and it's like I appreciate all that great content, because it's like that's top of mind for me. And some of those people, it's like, oh, I bought their menu planning thing because the content is like so great. Or then I share and I send it to all my mommy friends, like, hey, you should follow this person, and helping to build that community. So I think it's so important. Another account that I really like that has really good content is called The Holistic Psychologist. Have you heard of her?
No.
Yeah, she has like a book and some things, but it's really interesting. I love psychology, especially coming from like the advertising marketing world of like, putting that ideal customer hat on and like getting in the head of like, how is this person thinking? Like, how do I reach them? And so all of her content is really just like educating people about like triggers and like different things around like psychology and how your brain works and all that stuff. And yeah, when I'm like brainstorming for clients, I'm like, how can we like create content that is really educational but fun and of value, and it doesn't have to be super crazy.
No, it doesn't have to be super crazy, and it can also be simple, like asking yourself like exactly like what your ideal client wants. And that's why I actually think like I think sometimes people get way too into their ideal client avatar, and they're like obsessed with this idea of like Jennifer, who's like 25, living in Seattle, like who loves to hike on the weekends with her dog Marty, like, right? Like it's like people get like obsessed with this, and I'm like, I hear you that this is really important, and like I actually really think it's valuable, but you need to think like the next step of that is like not just making the avatar, but thinking about like, where does this person hang out? Like what other accounts are they following? Like when they look at other people's accounts, like how are they engaging? Like I said this on another podcast the other day, but it's like, would you engage with this content? Like if you're the ideal client, like would you engage? Often we're selling to a past version of ourselves. Like, would you actually want to engage with it? Like, asking some of those questions, because I think it's really easy for us to get like in the weeds on like building that avatar. And so I'm curious for you, Emily, like if somebody was in that early stage where they're still kind of building and not at the outsourcing stage yet, how would they start to hone in on who that person is?
I think it's kind of that building out that persona, but then also just starting to another kind of good tool to use, especially for us with our audience being nonprofits and B2B service-based businesses, is utilizing LinkedIn and like poll people. So you can use free types of tools to do that and ask friends and family to get feedback on different things. You can even do like surveys. So those are really like cost-effective, easy ways to start getting feedback around like what you're doing, and how to adapt it, to create that kind of like feedback loop, and then build feedback into your process. So it's like, for us, after we have a client, we send a survey and we also ask for a testimonial, but hopefully they also get feedback in their survey. And then we, bring that to kind of our quarterly meetings of like, okay, this is what our clients are saying. And then we do kind of a retrospective with our clients like quarterly and just be like, what's going on really well, not only like on the stuff that we're working on, but like how we're working together. So just kind of creating that like feedback loop has been beneficial, and we've gotten some good feedback around things, and some things you can't address immediately, but they're just good to know.
And I think too, like changing our own narratives around feedback, that like feedback isn't a bad thing, like it's just information. And like I always say this about social, like people will be like, I posted that and it got 15 likes and like I have 1,000 followers and that sucks. And I'm like, okay, yeah, like that feels like it sucks, but it's just information that your content didn't land. And that maybe you need to address your messaging, maybe you need to address the format, like whatever that looks like. It's like stripping that negativity and creating it to be like, it's just information.
So true. So true.
How do you implement some of that stuff, Emily? Like when you're hearing some of that feedback and you're like in your processes, like how do you kind of, especially in the day-to-day where we're so busy and it feels like, taking a step back to implement can be difficult. How do you make space for that?
I think just making time, like whether that's like quarterly or monthly or weekly, whatever it is, that you're already thinking about your business. So for us, we do, monthly kind of founder check-ins where we can bring bigger things, but we also do kind of like these quarterly retrospectives and quarterly planning. And so I feel like that's a really good time where you're like, okay, I have like an hour and a half or 2 hours blocked off to be like thinking about my business in this way. So let's take some of that feedback and like, how do we want to bring that into our day-to-day of what we're working on? And maybe that's not executed on in the next immediately. Like maybe it takes like 6 months to do something like that. Like some of the feedback was like, oh, could this be done faster? Or like, how can we make this process faster? And so it's like, okay, we actually created then like a smaller like package or a faster package process to do things. But it took us time to then like think about like, okay, how do we like, what steps do we take out of our process for doing this? So yeah, I think it's just like carving out time and like making space for yourself, which I know is hard, but for me, it's like if I put it on my calendar, and then who else needs to be there? If you're a solopreneur, it's like you can make the decision, but maybe you need then people to help you execute on it. Or if you have a business partner, like making time for that.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's so important.
For sure. Do you and Maria, do you all have your kind of business planning stuff?
It's funny, we talk about this all the time. We're like, in a way, yes, also this is hilarious, Emily, you'll laugh, but people won't see this. My dog's behind me and he's like full tilt, like
spread out.
Yeah, like that is like not how I would live my life on the edge of a couch, but that's fine. All the power to him. Yes, we do that, but it's really hard because I find it hard to step away from the busyness. And that I know it's a priority, and it's one of those things that every time we take a few days, like we'll go to a mastermind or we'll do something together, every
Right.
time we take a few days and we just like backpedal and we can have some conversations, our business always ends up better. Like we always, like, when we fix something or we make some more money in a way we weren't expecting, or like something cool happens when we take the space. But it's so easy to fill your schedule with stuff, and sometimes it's like not helpful work that you don't need to be doing. Or like for me, in this season, I'm doing a lot of like podcast episodes, and that's such high value work. Like I've done 3 today. Like that's like high value. But at the same time, that does take away from something else, and I'm choosing that proactively, right? So we need to like, yeah, it's hard to find that, but that's the same thing with anything in business. It's like, do you want to do LinkedIn? Okay, you want to do LinkedIn. That takes priority over maybe doing some more brand messaging stuff, or it takes priority over posting on TikTok. Like it's all about like finding that balance.
Yes, for sure. And your point too about like when you take a step away, it's like when we try and do, you know, twice a year, once a year, kind of like a retreat. And I feel like that's our time to be like, we are like going to be gone for 3 days. We don't book any client calls. We like take off like work, and then we actually like client work, and then we're able to say like, all right, let's like actually like work on the business. So I think being really intentional about like that time that you're taking is really important.
Did you find that that was easier because you've been in business, you said, for almost 5 years or over
Yeah.
5 years? Like, did you find that at the beginning that was easier?
Actually, I feel like it was easier in the sense of like we were starting, so we didn't know exactly what we were doing. So we
Yeah.
were trying lots of different things. Um, but I feel like it's been easier now just like setting boundaries and having more of like a workflow with our clients of like the cadence of like kind of how we're working. And so now we've kind of made it like we know that we're doing a retreat every like twice a year at least, like meeting up because I'm in, you know, Washington State area, and Michaela's in the Hawaii area, and so we're not together, so we're virtual, and so like meeting up in person and doing these things. So now it's just kind of part of our like, okay, like we just met up in Alaska actually and went on a little backpacking hiking thing, and funny enough we didn't do any work which we needed. We're like, okay, we're like not doing work, we're just going to be out in nature together. We both grew up in Alaska together, so like the outdoors is definitely like a part of who we are, and being sisters, it's like making sure that we create time and space for us to like nurture that relationship, not just like being business
Hmm.
partners.
Maria and I find that too. Like we're obviously best friends too. So it's like it's hard for us sometimes when you're in it, and it's like also like, okay, we don't need to talk about work. Like, you know, we can go for a drive and we can talk about other things because we're so. I don't know that there's anyone other than I have a close best friend, but like other than Kiara, like there's nobody that knows my life like Maria does. And so it's like we're both like, oh my gosh, like we just had this conversation. How did that go? Or like we're listening to different podcasts, and we're always kind of like trying to develop our business, but like actually taking a moment to be like, how's your mom doing? Like, you know, like like how are things, right? So it's, and I think that's actually the beauty of like building your own business. Is like you get to make the rules, you get to choose what it looks
Yeah.
like, and like what all your relationships look like. I was going to ask you about your retreat. So with you guys being so far away, like, do you go to Alaska? Do you go to Hawaii? Like, where are you going for these retreats? I need to know. Mexico?
Yeah. Oh, maybe Mexico next. I would love that. You just went to Mexico.
Yeah, I did. I love Mexico. And I was actually just on the phone with Maria before this, and we were talking about doing a team retreat. And I was like, could we go to Mexico? Like, do you think that's kosher? I think I need to ask our CFO. I need to ask him. I don't know if he'll be down, but
You should definitely do it.
I feel it might be like an ask for forgiveness rather than permission situation.
Yeah.
So that's gonna happen. But yeah, where
Well,
do you go on these retreats?
well, with Michaela being in Hawaii, we've gone to Hawaii, we've gone to Alaska a couple times, and then since I'm kind of in the Seattle area, Michaela will sometimes come here and we'll like go visit clients in Seattle, and then take like a weekend and go out to the San Juan Islands, or like go do something and rent a little cabin or do something like that. So I would like to do, we've been talking about trying to do like a yoga retreat kind of thing where it's like we could go and just like do yoga and be outside and I don't know, do that type of thing. So um, that's a future one. But we have one actually coming up in September, we're going to the Beyonce concert in Seattle.
I need to know, can you write off these Beyonce tickets?
I mean, they're for work, right?
I know. It's always a hard thing when you've got a good relationship because you're like Maria and I will do something. We're like, can we write the spa trip off? Like, because we were together and
Yeah, we talked about business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my
Oh,
God, I need to know. I need to know how this Beyonce write
I
off goes.
feel like most tax accountants would say, yeah, right? So,
If the
yeah.
CRA comes after you, it's not on me. Yeah.
I know, it, like, take this part out of the podcast episode.
Take the transcription out. That's funny. Oh,
Yeah,
I'm curious for you, like if you had to give somebody like one piece of advice around like marketing their business and like, build when they're starting to build their business for them to focus on, especially if they're DIYing some of the stuff themselves, where would you tell them to spend their energy?
I think first is just making sure you have a really clear message about like answer the question like you even asked me like your I help statement, like who do you help? So just like a clear kind of like mission, vision, and your kind of brand messaging, your brand story. If you can just kind of like narrow that in, start getting feedback around it, start building out your persona about who you are, talk to your customer, get feedback, and then start building out a mini plan about how you're going to best reach that person. So like, what channel do you want to focus on? Is it a social media channel? Is it something else? And just do one thing well. You don't have to do everything, but if you're going to focus in, like just focus in on one channel to start and choose, like we talk to our clients about choosing kind of like a bigger piece of content. Like for example, your podcast, like do like a podcast or do something that you like. Is it writing? Is it video? What is it that you like doing? And focus kind of a theme around that for the month, and then slice and dice that up for your social media and repurpose that content. Make it easy on yourself. I guess that was more than one tip, but that was
no, that's great. And you know what? I love those tips because it's so easy online. So I always ask people what their tips are because it's so easy online to hear somebody's story and be like, they've had success. Like we've had all of our success basically on Instagram. And so, but I know Instagram's not everybody's platform. And I know you guys love LinkedIn. Like people love different platforms. And so that's why I'm like, you don't need to be everywhere. Find something you love doing. If you love podcasting, how do you podcast smarter? And if that's like uploading to YouTube and clipping and then having a VA post it everywhere, great. Like, whatever that looks like for you, I think is what's really important. And so, Emily, thank you so much for being here today. I loved connecting with you when we connected. I'm so happy that we had the opportunity to connect a little bit more today. This was so fun. And I'd love for you to tell people where they can find you when they're looking for you.
Definitely. Well, I just had a blast talking to you, Christina. So thank you so much for having me. You can find Brilliant Marketing online at hellobrilliantmarketing.com or on our Instagram at Brilliant Marketing.
Awesome. And I will put all that in the show notes so that you can connect over with Emily. If something resonates with you from this podcast, please feel free to connect with us about it. I know I have my wheels turning on a few marketing items like around our ideal clients, and I'm like, oh, I wonder like how finesse we are there. So that's great. And yeah, make sure that you give Emily and her team a follow, and looking forward to hearing what resonated with you. Thanks so much for listening to the Build Your Digital Community podcast. If you loved the episode, please don't forget to rate us and leave us a review. Now, we'd love for you to be a part of our digital community. Text JOIN to 855-908-4688 to join our text list for exclusive social media tips, or DM us on Instagram at The Social Snippet, letting us know what you loved about the episode. Keep on building community, and to this and so much more.